my ambition to get through 2 photographers, 2 sculptors, and 2 architects is crumbling in front of me as I get into each one of these, and I think, oh, but no, they need. I want to tell more about this person and more about this person. So we'll get however far. You'll go as far as I get. As I guess that I think we'll spend all day on this woman, and I'm calling her this woman while I'm assuming people are still maybe joining, because you can choose how you pronounce her first name. She, in her family, was Diane. They chose the French pronunciation. And I believe that can make you sound very much as if you were in the know if you call her Diane. But there are a number of people who knew her and still, like the man who developed all of her photographs and various experts who take the more common plain Jane American Diane. And I'm frankly accustomed to the Diane Arbus. The photographs of hers that you'll see today, most of them, I think, stand a strong likelihood of being familiar to you. She produced a great number of photographs, and there are 6 or 7 publications just of her photos in a series through Aperture. So if you want to explore more, there's a lot more to see. But I'll give you something to see now. Here she is as a youngster. And leave that on for the beginning of the brief biography. There is a biography by Patricia Bosworth, which is readily accessible. It's not one that was authorized by her family. And she did not have, Patricia Bosworth didn't have access to a number of key figures. Perhaps that's the reason it's a biography that very much leads toward the exploring the irregularities in her biography, especially her sexual exploits, her, I wouldn't even say neurotic, but the, just it emphasizes too much the extraordinary range of her character, I believe. Yet it is very interesting. So in a sense, you have had an indirect connection with her family already, in that the biographer who wrote the book Fierce Poise on this decade of Helen Frankenthaler's career, that's such a very interesting book, the new book about her work in the 50s. That's would have been her nephew. Diane's was born Diane Nemiroff. So her brother is Howard Nemiroff, who was the US Poet Laureate. So a very distinguished family. And a family with an unusual structure. Her father, well, her mother inherited a great deal of wealth because she came from a family, their last name is Rusacks, that I don't know if any of you would know that there was a Rusacks department store in Manhattan. It grew out of a fur store, I mean, especially fine furs. And it was down around Altman's. Then her father, David Nemiroff, came in and took over that business. And I think they had several branches. And for a long time, it flourished anyway. So the family was very wealthy. And like Helen Frankenthaler, Diane Arbus grew up in a Park Avenue environment. However, whereas Helen Frankenthaler grew up in what seems to have been an extremely healthy, child-oriented, nurturing, in quotes, environment, that's not what Diane and Howard faced. Their father was completely absorbed in the business. He was always planning new innovative programs, whether it's from the way the windows were displayed to the way the rooms were set up and how he was choosing to gauge how it fit in with Paris fashions. It's really key, a key merchant in his career. And her mother was a woman who was very depressive, who would spend her mornings in bed on the phone, and then in her afternoons played cards. Later in her life, her mother had a whole year of such extreme depression that she could hardly get out of bed. Now, that in the most direct functioning of the household would have made no difference, because Diane and her brother were raised by a succession of nannies and governesses. They had cooks and maids and a chauffeur. So it's more like the sort of the stereotype of the old British aristocracy, where you have a whole retinue that takes care of the children while the parents are doing their thing. Certainly from her mother, it seems to me, Diane inherited this capacity for great depressions, and she does take her own life when she's 48. And she talked frequently, it's so easy and so glib to sort of paste on modern psychiatric designations. But she certainly had periods where she was full of optimism, and then she would have periods where she was extremely depressed. So she had a kind of a volatile character, an intense character. And I was thinking, perhaps her absorption in photography would be a little bit like her mother's was with cards. So I'm thinking maybe there's a pattern visible. So back to Diane as a youngster. She and her brother's just maybe 2 years older than her, 3 years. They went to Fieldston School. She did very well. She, like Helen Frankenthaler, was torn whether to go into writing or into the visual arts, but definitely had that strong creative drive. From some of her comments, and then from other people's comments sometimes later, she seemed to have always felt a little bit apart from things as an observer, although she made very great friends and people who just adored her. They said she was very beautiful with deep green eyes, and you'd just be drawn into the vitality of conversations with her and interactions with her. Well, one of the people who got drawn into the vitality of her was Diane Arbus. She met him when she was 14. He was maybe just a couple of years older, and that was love at first sight. Now, her parents were dead set against this, but the two of them snuck around seeing each other. She was insistent that she was going to marry him, and the minute she was old enough to marry, she did marry him. Now, this is Diane Arbus that we also know as an actor, a movie and TV actor, but that's a later stage in his career. They got married in 1941, and he immediately went into the military, and in the military, he worked as a photographer. So when he got out, Diane and he set up a business called Diane and Ellen Arbus Photographers, and they did fashion photography. So you could see that sort of fed out of the family business and connections. And worked at this for about 10 years. Here's a photograph of the two of them around 1950. You can see they're both handsome people. And they were extremely close. Here's another one of them. Notice how much she's already changing. He encouraged her to free herself from the proprieties of her Park Avenue background, and she was extremely willing to do that. So she has this rough cut hair, little funny things like he said, don't shave your body, why use deodorant? So she's going into the, more and more separating herself from her family. But they have this business. It did okay. And I have two photographs of their work. They did photo shoots for Glamour and Harper's Bazaar, a few other places. Now, Ellen would do the photography, and actually, Diane worked mainly sort of as the stylist. She would come up with the idea for the theme of the shoot and help to set it up, help get the models, arrange the makeup. And only indirectly, therefore, being the photographer. Here's another one. They're bland, very 50s. I'm sure most of us can remember what it was like. Very bland and very 50s, at least on the surface. So they'd set up this business in 46, and in 56, she dropped out. They continued to use their name, and he continued to do fashion photography for a while. But he encouraged her to develop her interest in photography individually. She took classes with several major people. Bernice Abbott, I'll show you one of her pictures, and Lisette Modell, through the New School of Social Research and elsewhere. So she was instilled in some of the philosophy of photography and learned something about the actual practical features. Ellen would mainly develop her photographs for her at first. But so she was then free to do as she wanted, to explore her own vision of what photography would make possible. Here's a photograph of her from near the, in her last years. So you see again how very much she's changed. And this also gives you some sense of what kind of photography she will be. She's a documentary photographer, a street photographer. Here she is in Central Park, and this is her mode of operation. But she'll meet people and talk to them and then photograph them. So this she did until her death. Initially, she worked just with a 35mm lens, and we'll show what those pictures look like. And then later she does these twin lens reflex, these like this, what's like a cousin of the Rolleiflex camera. Definitely not hers. Those of you who had American art in the 30s with me would be familiar with this, and you'd be familiar, most of you anyway, because it is such a very famous image. This is by Dorothea Lang in the 1930s, and called, for convenience, just The Migrant Mother. But I brought in 3, I believe, examples of previous American documentary photography, because the 30s was a great period for it. But Dorothea Lang doing this, Walker Evans doing this of a scene in, I think it's in Mississippi. This is Walker Evans, who worked with James Agee in the Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. Or let's see if I have one other. Yeah, her teacher, Bernice Abbott, This is Blossom Street in downtown Manhattan. These are all documentary photographed in the 30s, but it's being subsidized by the WPA, and they are ways of providing income for photographers, just as they provided work for people in other areas in the arts. But they also have a very strong political message, and it is to support the government projects of under FDR. So you have the idea of the terrible plight and the suffering of the migrant workers out in California, or the poverty in the rural South, the need to have programs, unemployment insurance, something to help to support these people. And then in this one, actually, with Bernice Abbott, it's really more that she's just documenting the change in the city. But so that's what most of the, not all, but a great deal of the marvelous 1930s documentary photography looks like. This is by Diane. Now she's out on her own. It just has a very prosaic title, Taxi Cab Driver at the Wheel. And this is the year she's first going out on the street and doing her photography. This one gets mentioned frequently because it is almost giving her already the stamp of Diane's approach and personality, because it is just a casual scene on the street. For all that, could be Blossom Street, where the last one was. But it is the cabbie, because he's looking, maybe with bemusement, right out at the photographer. This is what she will do that is so different from the others. That I was showing two others she later had as an exhibit with in the modern. But this is what sets her apart, is that her documentary photography is not of the passing scene that the photographer just happens to see and for whatever aim takes a photograph. Hers are of insistent demand that the person that she photographs interact with her. She would sometimes say it's almost like the subjects chose her. And of course, if the person in the picture is interacting with her or with the camera, that's the person who's interacting with us. This is from the same year. Now you see two, look at her. Out of the corner of her eyes, but she's looking at us. It's just a girl with a school bag, probably waiting for the school bus. In a sense of that she's very grown up and on her own and all isolated in this space. I don't know very much about photography, but I have picked up from the discussions I was listening to and have read that for some people, that great value of using a 35mm lens was that you were using film that had this, well, you're either going to have it, we talked about before, either the portrait view, a vertical orientation, or a landscape, but it's not square. And the feature of that, other than the composition of the scene, is that then you or me, any of us looking at it, could kind of wander around and take in different parts of the picture as we do. And also with this, you are going to get grainier images. So there's a kind of a softness, a kind of a texture. Of course, it's not palpable as if it were a painting, but it creates a kind of a mood just in itself. Another one she did that same year, just a woman on the street. Perhaps not looking directly at Diane, but isolated as if, especially because the rest of the setting is blurry around her, as if she's aware of being photographed. What Diane had a difficulty with throughout her life was to remember to get releases from people when she took their photographs for them to be published. These originally, she's taking just for herself. This is the way she's taking in the world. One of her teachers, I think it's maybe not Bernice Abbott, was even encouraging her always to be wearing your camera. You can have no film in the camera, but just have it so you can lift it up and look through the lens, so you get accustomed to seeing the world through the camera lens. And Diane would do that to the intense irritation of her family of birth, that there would even be like ceremonial meals, and she would come, like Thanksgiving dinner, and she'd be bedecked in her camera, and she'd be picking it up, putting it down, picking it up. That's a way of, I actually gave her a reprieve from the complex arrangement in her family. But so she's just doing this because she needs to, because she wants to. They don't always have human figures in them. The ones most people are familiar with do. So this one is, but she's from outside a diner, just looking in. And then this one has been, I think, more often reproduced, this lady on a bus. Because this is quite fine. This fur-wrapped woman sits there as if she's sort of pulling back, completely encased in this. Oh, maybe it's cold in the bus, but he looks a lot more casual back here. It's as if she's pulling back, yet she is looking directly out at Diane. And Diane would almost always have a conversation with the person that she photographs. No, I don't know if she does here. So, there's so many people have written so much in response to her photographs, but here's one like, well, first that she transforms the art of photography, but her images frame the familiar as strange and the strange as familiar. She looks so deeply that each time you see an Arbus image, you want to know the story behind the subject and who the photographer is. There's just this resonance and depth in them. And I brought in more still to show how unusual that approach was. This is going back to Walker Evans in the late 30s. When he, in New York, he would photograph in the subway. He just did this series called the Subway Series. But what he did was to hide his camera in a fold of his coat. So he's surreptitiously photographing, which is more typical of what people would do. Or here's another stratagem that was used. And this is a painting of Ben Shah's, and it shows Ben Shah photographing on a Sunday morning. And what he has is a right angle camera, right angle lens. See, so it looks as if he's photographing something out here, but the lens is toward these figures. So that you would get people off guard and casual. So when does her work first gain attention? Well, for the first time in 1960, Esquire magazine publishes a series. This late 50s and the 60s were really a heyday of documentary photography, and it appeared in many magazines that there would be whole spreads of photographs. And so she did this series, and she wrote the text. The art editor helped her choose from the number of photographs she brought in, which ones, but then she would also do the kind of text. And I have, maybe you can read it there, and I also have the text there that I'll read to you. So this would be the centerfold. You're looking at the two opposite images from this. Sorry. So you have Hezekiah trembles. The Jungle Creep, performed 5 times a day at Hubert's Museum, 42nd and Broadway. Well, this is one of the many places she went because she is drawn to society's outsiders. Whether, if you want to go do this dangerous psychologizing of a person, is she trying to be around people who evoke something more out of her, bring out something latent in her that she can connect with in the way she doesn't connect with most of her family? Is it a rebellion against the kind of propriety in her family? But anyway, she's drawn to carnivals, drag scenes, people with physical abnormalities, the whole range of the fringes of society, and she brings them right up in front of you. So as here you have this, Hubert's Museum was Hubert's Dime Museum and Flea Circus on 42nd Street. And she would go to these places repeatedly. Then the one next to it on the opposite side, there's Mrs. Dagmar Patino, photographed at Grand Opera Ball, benefiting Boys Town in Italy at the Sheraton East Hotel. And here she's, these, as I said, chosen with also the art editor. So you have the contrast of the dark and the light and the slightly crisper focus, and this deliberately very blurry one of the rather more debutante looking person there. And these look grainy also because they were photographed from the magazine. But I've got they're all 6, and I have all 6 here. This photo essay is called Vertical Journey, 6 Movements of a Moment Within the Heart of the City. This is Flora Knapp Dickinson, honorary regent of the Washington Heights chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. So that long history of the prominent Americans symbolized by the DAR. And then you have someone who would be definitely on the fringes. Andrew Radache, actor, in his Manhattan rooming house, following a late show performance of his specialty imitations of Marilyn Monroe and Maurice Chevalier singing Valentina. This will be a point for you. I invite you to enter into this dialogue between those people who believe that Diane Arbus draws you into these people who look at you with the same calm, self-accepting appraisal that she maybe wants you to have of them, but she's not treating them as freaks. As opposed to one of the major writers early in photography, Susan Sontag, who said, let's see if I can see what she said about this in particular. Said about her photographs of drag queens, contortionist dwarves. So they're too impervious. They're based on distance, a privilege, or a feeling that what the viewer is asked to look at is really other. She accused Diane of exploiting her subjects. In photographing dwarfs, you don't get majesty and beauty, you get dwarfs. So there are these polar opposite reactions to her photographs. And that's no ways it's saying what her reaction is. That's just how we see them. Walter L. Gregory, also known as the madman from Massachusetts, photographed in the city room of the Bowery News. Person unknown, morgue, Bellevue. So that's the complete series that was in the Esquire. There is another aspect of looking at photographs in the discussions I've come across, is that the different arenas, maybe I'd say, where you look at them. When you have a magazine, of course, you can take it really close to your face. You can look at it at length. But they're arranged in an order where you follow that order. You can go back and forth, but you can never see two of them together except that double spread at the beginning. And so that's you're sort of forced into a kind of a system. But she has helped, and the art editor have chosen what that is. I mean, what order they want you to be looking at these, maybe get the jolt of how different that is from this extremely alive older man to go to this. Well, in the 60s, she would, let's just say, explore all these sort of like alternate, it just seems almost like family settings or groups of people. And I brought in several that she did of what were at the time called female impersonators. There was a troupe of them that would go around and perform in different clubs. And she was familiar with them, very familiar with them. So I brought in a couple here. This is just a female impersonator with long gloves, Hempstead, Long Island, 1959. So look at the moment when she's choosing to show them. This is not when they're on stage performing, but where they're in, I guess now the fancy word you'd say is the liminal space. They are going from their male bodies, their masculine selves, and acquiring the female costume. The figure has already put on the makeup. You have a person who's transforming here in all the clutter of the dressing room. And this person who's perfectly comfortable, not startled in the least, as you watch. Two female impersonators in a doorway. So she's always doing these dressing room scenes. Three female impersonators. I think this is so clever. You have two whom you see primarily in the mirror, who are wearing, it looks like, almost identical wigs. And then one standing up in between. In this soft, these foggy lights, she's just using available light in the dressing room. And this is not something she's using with any kind of tripod. She's just standing there photographing this. So you get three human beings in three completely different states of being. This intent focus, slightly more distant, looks like she's looking at her fingernails. Someone lost in thought. So she had several sets of photographs that were shown in magazines. The she and her husband had, or she especially, had a terrible time earning enough to sustain herself. The two of them had 2 children, but her family money didn't come to her easily. Whenever she and Al had needed money, they had to go to David and ask. He never provided in advance. He didn't set up any fund for them. It was always the patriarch doling out bit by bit. So they lived a pretty hardscrabble life. But when she got things in magazines, or when magazines agreed to show a photo essay for her, sometimes she would write the essay as well as come up with the idea for the photographs. Even if they were never published, the great advantage for her was that then she had a photo pass, she had a press pass. So she had a credential that let her in places and a kind of a freedom to do things that might have been more difficult for her to do on her own. And then here you see her moving into a different level of public recognition. In '67, the Museum of Modern Art had a show, it was called New Documents, of 3 photographers. The curator of photography at MoMA was essentially, what are you going to say, the king of photography in the US, because that museum, its imprimatur is like, this is an important artist, was the way of that person being made. Oh, it's true in painting and sculpture as well as in photography. And photography was still quite new. I think it was not until the late 60s that the Met even started to acquire photographs. They certainly weren't yet exhibiting them. But here's the show called the New Documents, and I have a number of them in there. Looking at that, we'll see, but seeing them just set up on the walls like this, just so starkly. You see, it's another viewing situation. It's not now where you have to stand patiently in line as follow everybody else around. You could maybe go look at this one, maybe this one, or maybe something over here catches your eye. But you can never also press your nose right up against it. So you're seeing things from a slightly greater distance. Now, she didn't create photographs just for this exhibition, and they range in dates. But first, I'm going to show 2 each by the 2 other photographers who were showed with her. And let's see if I can give you the quote from the curator who set it up, saying that these are new kinds of photographs. They're taking the documentary approach to more personal ends. And this first photographer is a man named Gary Winogrand. It's quite a well-known photographer. The people are totally unaware of him, but he's taken the chance observation of the youngster who's gesture, of course, like the adults, and so neatly fits in under her belly. So there's a lot of wit in that scene. Here's another one he did. Or Lee Friedlander was the other one. Here's the one, of course, obviously not in Manhattan, but he often did ones that he would deliberately choose tilted scenes. So they had that sense of, again, it was big, just, a casual, you'd walk by and this is what you'd see. You know, I was thinking about, this is what Baudelaire was asking for in the second half of the 19th century, that artists should be showing life as it is now. This kind of just as it appears. This is where Monet, various other French artists are responding in their paintings to just life as it is. You know, those girls are just turning around, grinning. The father may be slightly aware, but it's just a casual moment. And here's one he did in Manhattan. He often puts street signs or bits of all just the stuff of the construction of the city in it. Now she's aware. He seems totally oblivious. Now we go to Diane's. So these were ones that were I don't think these were, I can't guarantee these were all in that new document series, but these are examples of sort of the characteristic street documentary style of these two men. And these are hers. Young man and his pregnant wife, Washington Square. You'll notice one thing, she's in the 60s, she changed cameras. Now she's working with a square format, which allows much sharper detail. And since you can get closer to the subject, there's something that, because she used not the standard camera in the film being developed, it didn't quite fit the frame for developing as it ought to. So there's often this little black bit around it. And she showed that. Then she got really pissed off because other photographers began to imitate that. So she's wanting the photographs themselves to be seen as artifacts. She was intensely interested in what developer was used. I mean, she got the chemicals for that. She couldn't find any film in this country that was good enough. She had to import the film. So she had very specific aesthetic criteria for her photographs that for which all these technical details had to suit. So that's given you a fair amount of time to look at the couple. This, I think, too, was, you guys have to know this one. It's identical twins, Roselle, New Jersey. By having them stand so close together, they almost look as if they were Siamese twins. Just that one arm here in between. On Google, there's a photograph of the two women years later. The slight differences in the angle of their eyes is present. That's in their faces. So it's not that these are just necessarily a difference in the moods, but there is, you can see when you see that in the mouth, that these are two girls who look alike, stand alike, dress alike, but are not identical in character. Now, the way that Diane would find out about things like this is that she was really sedulously collecting information. She had kept notebooks full of information. She would listen to radio programs suggesting places to go. She'd cull through newspapers. This was in New Jersey, there was some like annual party for twins and triplets. And so she would come out to that. Or she'd get a lead from somebody. So she's always searching for these subjects. So she did that, and then here's one. Triplets in their bedroom in New Jersey for another year at that same annual celebration. Very different expressions on those three faces, aren't there? And in the wit in some of these, the more, I mean, of course, they all repay looking at again and again and again. As I read you that snippet of someone saying before, the idea of not only their identical beds, their identical clothing, their identical haircuts, but even look at this curtain of identical tiers, one on top of another. So this kind of duplicating pattern that gets repeated there. The one who seems the most solemn, most in shadow, is literally the most recessive in the scenes. You see their each one's, she's in front, middle, and she has the most outward looking personality and the most light on the face. Is just alert looking, and she's middle one responds, and she's lost in herself. This is a very dramatic one. Puerto Rican woman with a beauty mark. It's almost hallucinatory stare. Look how the lipstick on one side rises slightly higher. Another well-known one. Young man in curlers at home on West 20th Street. It's handled the same way she was doing those female impersonators, where you see the mixing of gender roles here. It's wonderfully sharp manicured nails and a very elegant way to hold a cigarette. Preparation for some elaborate hairstyle. The eyebrows very carefully penciled in already. The mascara there. Fairly large poured skin with some pock marks in it. And you can see a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow. And he's just completely comfortable in himself. Where's a person who looks quite anguished? This is exasperated boy with toy hand grenade, whom she saw in Central Park. This boy, years later, he said his father was a well-known tennis star, and his parents were in the middle of a divorce. So this kid felt that his parents just didn't have any time to pay attention to him. So you see, with this one hand, he holds this toy grenade, and this hand is like a claw. This kind of leads you down to that. This whole position askew. Look at that mouth. Oh my goodness. Exasperated seems to me almost a mild way to say what that looks like. I'd say it's closer to anguish. And then nicely playing family, talking family, friends back here in this blurry setting. Christmas tree in living room in Levittown, Long Island. So the ones that are chosen, you see, she's showing the range of subjects. So she's got the impersonator, she's got people she's seen on the street, she has close-ups, she has a more distant scene, and now you have one that is just an interior. The only even suggestion that there's a person of all the trees, there's the arms of a chair, as if that's where we are. But how utterly staged and set up and typical with a extraordinary cleanliness look. You don't keep your lampshades covered. Actually, I remember being in houses where you had plastic covers over your upholstery on the sofa. So that says a lot by what's absent. Then the very opposite, this comfortable, cluttered environment of Russian midget friends in a living room on 100th Street, New York City. She was going to, she proposed a series for Esquire that was going to be notes from a nudist camp, and in the mid 60s, she went down there and did a lot of photographs We'll see a couple of them. But this one, married couple at home, nudist camp. They're looking very gracious, very responsive, and extremely relaxed. Family evening, nudist camp, where she has these figures posed, and she probably didn't pose in that way. Maybe she did, who knows? But those are like French models in late 19th century painting, both of those poses. Not the daughter, though. So also an exterior with a great deal of empty sky here. Beauty contest at that camp. So they're all together, there were like 30 some photographs in that show. And that brought her prominence. But the great prominence came from this show called A Box of 10 Photographs. Well, it wasn't a show, it was originally, I'll talk about this box, but I wanted to give you an idea of the size of them. It was, I think it was in 2018, 2019, there was a show at the Smithsonian American Art Museum that had all 10 photographs. We'll show you all 10, talk about them. These are probably what are some of the ones most familiar to people. So she had this idea, she started working on this in '69, a way of reaching people, a way of getting her work out without the intermediary of a magazine, and a way of making some money and making a place for herself. To do something that would be the parallel of a limited edition of prints or lithographs, maybe some artists might do, that she would have a limited set of 10 photographs that she chose. And she had this box designed for them. It's kind of like a plexiglass box, which has a hole in the back so it could serve, you could hang it on the wall, it could serve as a frame. So in this box, there are the 10 photographs. There's a sheet of vellum between each one, and on the vellum, she's written a little description of each photograph, and she's signed each photograph so that they are individual collectors' works, that they are like individual works of art. She gave one set to the editor of her, I don't know if it was Art Forum. I think Art Forum. And she put in an extra one, so you see how she's crossed out here saying 11. But she practiced her handwriting for this all. Oh yeah, this is for the editor. You see down here, it says 5 out of 50. The goal was to make an edition of 50. All told, she made 8, and 4 she sold before she died. So let's go through. Here she is with one of them. This is what she wrote for it when it was, when the series was new. They're proof, this is about her photographs. They are proof that something was there and no longer is. And then get this, like a stain. The stillness of them is boggling. You can turn away, but when you come back, they'll still be there looking at you. You see, now she has that freedom. She gives you the freedom to take each one of these out of the box, arrange them in whatever order, look at them however long you want, and just as close as you want, on the wall or right up to your nose. So she's reusing some of them. Of course, here's that Christmas tree in the living room. And I'm just, the ones that, we just flip through the ones that you've already seen that were in the other show. Again, they range in date. And then these you didn't see. A family at home on their lawn one Sunday in Westchester. There are more recent photographers who set up scenes like this. They staged them, but she didn't stage hers. With that great expanse of grass and each person so isolated. A young Brooklyn family going for a Sunday outing. You know, what a very different family. And I will tell you that at her death, there were, I think it was like 5,000, many thousand canisters of film. She identified all by number, but in her proof sheet, she didn't say which one belonged to which canister. So people are still working their way through, especially one of her daughters kind of controls what is produced from her, what gets printed. So they're still emerging. It's just an enormous number of works. But this one, I think, how extraordinarily efficient and complex this is. Don't these two have just the same face? So that bonnet and this bonnet of hair. But the baby looks at you, and the father looks at you. She looks way over here, and their only other active person, their other child, looks way over there. These two both press toward you, and he's, much as his, the informality of his look, the directness of his gaze brings him to us. In both that that's a more muted color and that he's further in the background. So you have all these playing off against one another, and how united do they appear to you as a family? Could write a novel on that, couldn't you? I see we'll be doing just a little of this still next time. Boy with a straw hat waiting to march in a pro-war parade. See, it's a bomb Hanoi. God bless America. Are you appalled by him? Do you sympathize with him? A funny anecdote about him, he's one of the people that she forgot to get a release from to publish it. So she walked away from the parade, got in a cab, and then he was the cabbie. So she was able to ask him and got permission. The editor of Art Forum, who had not considered photography an art form up until this point, not like painting or sculpture. It's too mechanical. You can make too many accidents and just choose out what's good. Saw Diane's work. And here's what he said. With Diane Arbus, one can find oneself interested in photography or not, but one could no longer deny its status as an art. What changed everything was the portfolio itself. I mean, he saw this set of 10. He chose this then for the cover of Art Forum, and there were more of her from that set inside. And it's the first time he allowed that magazine ever to show photography. Let's see. Oh, it's time. I'm torn. I know I should stop. I could go on and on for these, but we will do a little more next. Let me give you a preview of coming attractions. Just show you the series and we'll come back and talk about them next time. That one, this one, and this one, which I think you might know best of all. Okay, so I will again invite questions, comments, anything at all? I'm going to stop the share. And any chat, anything.
Thank you once again for a wonderful program. My only comment is photographers taking pictures those years, the amount of pictures that she took was just amazing, because in this digital world,
yeah, you get rid of them right away.
10,000 times more, and
right.
there was no cost involved, not too much cost involved.
Yeah, it's a real labor then, right? By the time you develop them all to see what they look like. Yeah.
Hi, this is Rod. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I find it very difficult to assess this as art. If the criteria the critics and yourself are using as to where she's looking, if that's the criteria that casts her work as art, it bewilders me as to whether to assume that it's art because of the eyes and the direction of the artist.
Yes, I'm sorry if you pick that up as that is what makes her work, her treatment of the subjects, unusual, in that she demands that we interact as much as you might,
getting frozen.
not always in a portrait painting, but it is also the blacks, the whites, the composition. You know, if you take that Brooklyn family coming down the stairs, you'll find where there are, you know, I suggested like it means something that man is back a little bit and the darker is in the front. And there are parallels. There is a kind of like a formal composition, as much as you would do in any abstract work of art, that you can see and apply on hers. So there's the aesthetic quality is there too.
Well, I mean, periodically you're frozen, so I can't hear all your comments. But additionally, I find her topics, her subjects are kind of freaky. And, you know, if that's also the criteria that makes it interesting, I mean, we're thinking ahead of Mapplethorpe and Avedon and various other people who highlighted.
Right. And Avedon very much was a friend of hers and responded to her work. Yeah.
So I just find it very confusing as to whether to assess this as art, not only because of the various disputes about what photography is and what art should be, but specifically her work. I mean, I just find it so prosaic and so ordinary.
Well, you see, to my mind, that's one of the really wonderful things about almost anything visual. When it's provocative, that you can't so easily automatically accept it's beautiful, it's not beautiful, it's good, it's not good, that it's something you need to, that you want to come back to, because it's a little unsettling because you don't know what your stance is. Now, you may be settled in your stance. You know that this is like, no, okay, so other people think she's, I hate to tell you, this is what I think of Renoir. I mean, people think he's great. And I was like, oh man, I can't stand looking at Renoir. We all have our choices.
I love that they spent 10 years selling, getting assignments with their store, doing fashion photography, which is basically advocating. You want to sell something.
Yeah.
And then she goes to her later work, her individual work, where she doesn't strike me as if she's selling anything, that she's being totally non-judgmental. It's like the opposite of where she came from and what she had been doing for 10 years.
Yeah, the later work is very much more in our current view, isn't it? That what she's trying to do is find herself in the later works more.
Yeah, I have a question. I just in connection with what was just said before, the editor of Art Forum said, well, photography, you take a lot of pictures, and there are a lot of accidents, and then you just pick out what you like, what works. What's wrong with that? What am I missing in that method? That wouldn't be judged as art. You take a lot of pictures and then you pick out the ones that work. That's selection. That's a choice.
Yeah. Well, you can't talk to me about this. I'm an old fogey. I grew up looking at art before it was even considered art. It had some other message. That's its purpose, like altarpieces. They weren't art. Leonardo, that wasn't art. That was an altar of the Madonna. So it's like,
yeah.
It's a 18th, 19th century, 20th century view. But now it is, yeah.
Great.
Anybody else would just,
Yeah, well, Diane Orbis, I have mixed feelings. It's some of her work I find it's almost sensational. I have an issue with her choices.
The subject matter.
Subject matter. I find even the picture of the husband, wife, and the two kids. The boy looks like he has some. He's challenged in some way. The baby looks the most, quote, normal. The husband is looks like he's somewhat distant, and the woman looks like she could be a transvestite in her makeup and her demeanor. And it's not a. I mean, she chose them because they looked unusual.
and the interesting thing is, she doesn't photograph people who are, she doesn't have to be furtive about this. I mean, she's not always like, oh, look at that oddity over there. She's getting people who say, I am this. I am a midget. I am transgender.
Or I am a giant, or I am a family, but it's not, but she's, is her fame because she photographs them so candidly, or is it because it's a freak show, or is it that you're given permission by the acceptance at the Met, for example, that these are acceptable to look at, and you're looking at highly unusual, off the beaten path subjects.
Right.
And I'm conflicted with it because I can appreciate it from one point of view. I can see the artistry, but I'm also concerned with her choices.
And I believe when I read, the literature, you can just see the change of public attitudes coming through in that, because there are now people saying, look, she is making us realize we are seeing the people on the margins that we refused to look at before. Now we have to see their humanity. So there's a very positive view. And then you have Susan Sontag with good reason saying, these are dwarves. Why are we looking at dwarves? And we haven't gotten to the end of her work. And you think also, what would have happened if she continued beyond stopping at 48? I mean, how would her growth have gone? But in these later photographs, like in the one in the box at 12, that's when she's got this, she's taking bigger pictures and she's using a flash, and you can get closer to them. So those are inherently more dramatic, more strongly dark and light, and you can get much closer to the picture. So that kinds of a new kind of intensity too. And these are the same ages when Artemisia Gentileschi is now a popular artist. Caravaggio is more and more liked. That we're living in an era where intense drama is something that gets our eye, and there's an appetite for it. So,
as a
25 years now, there might be quite a different view.
As a person who tried to be a street photographer, I got to tell you how much trouble you can get into. I tried photographing people just on the sly as she was doing, and when I noticed
No,
it,
she did not do it on the sly.
well, I did, and I got to tell you, people got irate, especially during the where was it, the McCarthy era in the 50s. People thought I was from the FBI and I was going to report them. So I got into a lot of trouble, a lot of screaming matches. It was quite dangerous to do that.
Yeah, no, see, she never did that. I mean, I shouldn't say never ever, but she would have conversations with people. who often evidently reported feeling gratified by the conversations. Because her friends, I mean, from the time along, she just had a quality of vivifying people. That she had lifelong friends who just were drawn to the wattage of her personality.
What was the reason for the suicide? Was it clinical depression or something emotional?
Well, I don't know.
Was she considered a
Again, I
documentarian?
feel like very, very squeamish about. I think that's like prurient interest. It's really normal too. It's like I also don't like doing it with Van Gogh. You know, like, is he the way he is because of this or this? I don't know.
Mm.
More?
Did she consider herself a documentarian / artist? So with Sontag's remark, why, we're looking at dwarves. Well, Matthew Brady had us looking at dead bodies almost a century before as a documentarian. So I don't see Sontag. I haven't read it, so I'll have to read it. But
Yes,
I don't.
I've got to look at it because she's like, she won't have any of this. Yeah.
Oh, well, she's the same line as Brady. She comes from, there's a heritage of documentarians. No apologies necessary.
Okay, anybody more? Give me something to think about for the week, right?
I like that she acknowledged the hidden, the people that made us uncomfortable, that continue to make us uncomfortable. They exist, and they need to be embraced, and she did that.
Yeah.
At least acknowledged.
Exactly.
I may get to, well, I'll have a chance since I've already trespassing into next week with this, showing a man who's a tattoo artist, and I know comment from him. Yeah, she followed me around the whole damn day. It's like,
Next week, what do we have to look forward to?
a little scrap more of her, and then Cindy Sherman.
Oh, great.
Who, of course, talks about all of photography being just a theater.
Mm.
So
She's interesting.
point and counterpoint. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.